The hidden camera did not just record a conversation. It captured the exact moment Margaret Ellis's entire family betrayed her. Margaret was 72 years old and lived in an old white house on the outskirts of Portland, the same house where she and her late husband had raised their 3 children. For years, she believed that family was the last thing still intact after everything she had lost. But on a rainy afternoon, when a security technician sent her a video that had accidentally been saved on an old hard drive, Margaret saw familiar faces sitting around her dining table. Her eldest son, David, her daughter, Laura, her son-in-law, Mark, and even her granddaughter Emily, the little girl she had once carried in her arms as a newborn. They were not there to visit her. They were there to discuss how to get her out of the house. In the video, David spoke softly, but every word cut straight through Margaret's heart. "Mom is getting old. If we do not move quickly, this house will stay locked in the trust, and we will end up with nothing." Margaret stood frozen in front of the screen. Her hands shook so badly that her teacup slipped from her fingers and shattered across the floor. But the thing that hurt her most was not the plan itself. It was Laura's laughter that followed. Margaret's house was not the biggest in the neighborhood, but it had something her children desperately wanted: value. After the suburban area expanded, the land beneath her home increased dramatically in price. A real estate company had once offered enough money to keep the entire family comfortable for years. But Margaret refused, not because she was greedy, but because every corner of that house still carried memories of Henry, her late husband. He had built the bookshelf in the living room with his own hands. He had planted the rows of hydrangeas along the walkway. He had once told her that if he ever left this world first, she should stay in that house until her heart was ready to leave it too. Margaret kept that promise. But her children did not want to wait. David was the first to bring up selling the house. He spoke gently, sounding like a concerned son. "It's not safe for you to live alone, Mom. Sell the house and move somewhere better." Laura agreed. She said Margaret needed professional care. Mark came prepared with numbers, spreadsheets, taxes, and repair costs. They talked endlessly about her safety, but no one asked whether she felt lonely. No one asked whether she actually wanted to leave. For months, Margaret listened quietly. She never argued aggressively. She simply replied that she was doing fine. The house did not need to be sold. And Henry's will clearly stated that the assets would only be distributed after her death or if she chose to transfer them herself. That single statement changed everything. The caring phone calls from David slowly turned into complaints. Family dinners became occasions where Laura brought brochures for nursing homes. Even Emily's hugs changed, replaced by uncomfortable glances that made Margaret feel as though she had become an obstacle standing between the family and a wealthier future. Margaret noticed the growing distance, but she still refused to believe it. Because a mother can doubt the entire world, yet it is almost impossible for her to doubt the children she sacrificed her youth to raise. 3 months before the truth came to light, Margaret suffered a minor fall in the kitchen. It was nothing serious. She had simply slipped while wiping water off the floor. But David immediately used the incident as proof that she was no longer capable of living alone. He hired a company to install a home security system. Margaret did not like the idea at first, but David insisted it was for her protection. Cameras were placed at the front door, in the hallway, the living room, and the dining room. Margaret did not know the system also recorded audio. And David certainly did not know that every piece of footage was automatically backed up to a security account registered under Margaret's name. One Thursday evening, Margaret attended her reading group at the community library. Heavy rain fell throughout the night, and she returned home later than usual. When she walked inside, she noticed the dining table had been wiped clean, but the air still carried traces of coffee and Laura's perfume. She called David. "Did you stop by the house today?" David answered almost immediately. "No, Mom. You must be remembering wrong." His response felt strange. But it was not until 2 weeks later, when a technician called to inspect the system after the hard drive reported an error, that Margaret learned the dining room camera had recorded a secret meeting. She opened the video out of simple curiosity, and her entire world fell apart. In the footage, David sat at the head of the table with a tense expression. Laura placed a blue folder in front of Mark. Emily stood near the window with her arms crossed. David said they needed a faster plan. If Margaret continued refusing to sell the house, they would obtain documentation declaring her mentally incompetent. Laura said she knew a doctor who could help reevaluate Margaret's cognitive condition. Mark suggested creating pressure by reporting that she was living in unsafe conditions. Emily remained silent for a long time. Then she asked a question that made Margaret hold her breath. "But Grandma is not losing her mind." Laura looked at her daughter and answered coldly, "She does not actually need to be. The paperwork only has to be convincing." Margaret sat in front of the screen as tears streamed silently down her face. She watched every expression, every gesture, every nod of agreement. Then David delivered the final blow. "Once Mom is in a nursing home, we sell the house, we split the money, and everything will be fine." Margaret turned off the video. The house became terrifyingly silent. For the first time in years, she did not feel old. She felt hunted. The next morning, Margaret did not call her children. Instead, she called Henry's personal attorney. His name was Thomas Reed, a man in his 60s who was calm, meticulous, and deeply familiar with the Ellis family. When Margaret sent him the video, Thomas remained silent for nearly a full minute. Then he said only one thing: "Margaret, you need to protect yourself immediately." Within a week, every asset document had been reviewed. The trust was secured with additional protections. Access to medical records was restricted. A legal declaration was prepared, confirming that Margaret was fully competent to make her own personal and financial decisions. But Margaret was not ready to confront them just yet. She wanted to hear them lie one more time. That Sunday, she invited the entire family over for dinner. David arrived carrying a large bouquet of flowers. Laura brought an apple pie. Mark wore a polite smile. Emily avoided looking Margaret in the eye. Dinner began with small talk. The weather, the neighbors, the garden. Margaret sat at the head of the table where Henry used to sit, quietly watching her children perform the role of a loving family. After the main course, David placed his hands on the table and let out a sigh. "Mom, we've been thinking about this for a long time. Maybe it's time for you to consider moving somewhere with professional care." Laura immediately joined in. "Nobody wants to force you, Mom. We're only worried about you." Margaret looked at the daughter who had once cried in her arms after her first divorce. She remembered staying awake countless nights caring for Laura's child so her daughter could return to work. She remembered selling a cherished ring to help David pay off his business debts. She had given them too much. So much that they believed she had nothing left worth keeping for herself. Margaret placed her napkin on the table. "I have a question." The room fell silent. "If I refuse to sell the house, what exactly are you planning to do?" David frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Margaret looked directly into his eyes. "It's a simple question. If I refuse to leave this house, what are you planning to do?" Laura forced an awkward smile. "Mom, you're being overly sensitive." Margaret stood up. She walked to a small cabinet near the wall, picked up a remote control, and turned on the screen in the living room. The video began to play. Nobody said a word. David's face turned pale. Laura froze. Mark immediately lowered his head. Emily covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. David's voice echoed through the room. "Once Mom is in a nursing home, we sell the house." The sentence landed like a hammer blow. Margaret did not cry. She did not scream. She did not accuse anyone. She simply stood there, small in stature but stronger than anyone else in the room. "I've heard enough." David was the first to speak. He claimed it was only a conversation made during a stressful moment. He insisted everyone was concerned about her. He said nobody truly wanted to hurt her. Margaret looked at him with tired eyes. "People who care don't need to lie." Laura burst into tears. But her tears no longer softened Margaret's heart. Because in the video, Laura was the one who proposed the fake medical documentation. The daughter who always claimed to love her mother most was willing to turn her into a mentally incompetent old woman on paper. Mark stood up as if he intended to leave, but Thomas Reed walked through the front door. Margaret had invited him beforehand. The moment David saw the attorney, he understood this was no longer a family argument. This was consequences. Thomas placed a folder on the table. He informed everyone that Margaret had updated every legal protection available to her. Any attempt to pressure her, falsify records, manipulate her assets, or misrepresent her mental competence would be reported to authorities and pursued through civil court. Laura's voice trembled. "Are you really going to sue your own children?" Margaret turned toward her. "No. I'm trying to stop you from continuing down the wrong path." That answer left Laura speechless. Emily began to cry. She stepped closer to Margaret but stopped halfway, as if she no longer had the right to touch her. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I knew it was wrong. I wanted to tell you." Margaret looked at her granddaughter for a long time. She believed Emily had struggled with it. She believed Emily had not been the one who started it. But silence can sometimes become a way of standing beside the wrong people. Margaret spoke softly. Knowing something is wrong and staying silent still causes pain. Emily lowered her head. In that moment, nobody in the Ellis family could hide behind beautiful words anymore. No more concern, no more doing it for Mom, no more talk about the family's future. All that remained was greed, clearly captured by a camera. After that night, Margaret asked David, Laura, and Mark to leave her house. She did not slam the door. She did not curse them. She simply stood there, watching them walk off the porch beneath the cold rain. The door closed quietly. But to them, it sounded like the end of a family. The story did not become public immediately. Margaret had no desire to turn it into a scandal. She was still a mother. Despite everything, she did not want to completely destroy the children she had brought into the world. But the legal consequences could not be ignored. David was removed from any role involving the management of family assets. Laura lost access to her mother's medical and financial records. Mark received legal warnings regarding proposals that appeared to involve financial exploitation of an elderly person. Emily was the only one who came back. A week later, she stood outside Margaret's door with swollen eyes and a handwritten letter. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for immediate forgiveness. She only asked for 10 minutes. Margaret opened the door. Emily sat in the chair where Henry used to read the newspaper every morning. She explained that her parents had always described the house as the family's future. They said Margaret was selfish. They said she did not understand the value of the property. They told Emily that if she stayed quiet, she would eventually receive a share as well. Margaret listened as her heart tightened with pain. Not because of the money, but because they had taught a child that family love could be converted into financial value. Emily cried, "I was wrong. I was afraid of losing my family, so I stayed silent. But in the end, that silence almost cost me my grandmother." Margaret did not answer right away. She looked out toward the garden where the hydrangeas were blooming after the rain. Then she spoke slowly. "Forgiveness does not mean opening the door for someone to hurt you again. Forgiveness means refusing to keep your heart trapped in the day you were betrayed." Emily broke down completely. Margaret placed her hand over her granddaughter's. Not to erase what had happened, but to begin a new boundary. Over the following months, Margaret changed many things. She never sold the house. Instead, she transformed part of it into a small gathering place for older women in the neighborhood. Every Saturday afternoon, they came together for tea, books, and conversations about family, loss, and the quiet pain of becoming invisible to their own children as they grew older. Margaret never told her entire story, but everyone understood she had survived a deep wound. Thomas helped her create a new estate plan. Part of her assets would support programs that protected seniors from financial manipulation. Another portion would fund community scholarships. The remainder would be left only to people who proved their kindness through actions, not through bloodlines. David called many times. At first he was angry, then he begged. Eventually, he stopped calling altogether. Laura sent an apology letter, but even within the apology, she continued to place blame. She argued that Margaret was being too harsh. She said a mother should understand the pressures her children face. Margaret read the letter, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer. She did not need to answer every accusation. Some people apologize because they lost something valuable, not because they understand the pain they caused. Meanwhile, Emily continued visiting every week. She helped care for the garden, repaired the reading room, and learned how to cook the chicken soup Henry had loved. There was still distance between them, but it was an honest distance, no pretending, no performance, no perfect family illusion. One afternoon, Emily asked a question. "Do you ever wish you had never watched that video?" Margaret watched sunlight spill across the window frame. "No, the truth hurts, but it gave me my eyes back." 1 year later, Margaret's white house still stood quietly at the end of the street. The hydrangeas continued to bloom every rainy season. The old dining table remained exactly where it had always been, but the people sitting around it had changed. No more fake family dinners. No more questions wrapped in concern but driven by greed. Margaret lived more slowly now, more peacefully, and stronger than ever. She understood that growing old does not make a person weak. What makes people weak is believing they no longer have the right to protect themselves, the right to say no, or the right to hold on to what belongs to them. Margaret's story is a family drama story about betrayal, but it is also a story about dignity. It is the story of a mother who loved so deeply that she nearly forgot she deserved to be loved properly too. The hidden camera did not destroy her family. It simply revealed that the cracks had been there all along. And sometimes, the truth does not arrive to take everything away. Sometimes, it arrives to give you yourself back. If you were Margaret, would you forgive the children who secretly planned to take away your home and your freedom? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because your answer might make others rethink what family truly means. And if this story touched your heart, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us for more unforgettable family stories filled with secrets, betrayal, justice, and healing.